Hey everybody, and we are back with another episode of Can't Stop Snapping. This will be the last episode in our series of breaking down all of the original cards that are currently available in the game. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a couple things, which is first, there's been some data mining, some leaks of other cards that are visible in the code but aren't currently obtainable in the game. And so those have kind of been seen online. There's been some discussion starting to go around about those. We will have an episode next week covering those. So if you'd like to hear about those, make sure to follow, etc. I will put a spoiler warning in the description of that episode and an intro to that episode to make sure that if you're not wanting to quite hear about those yet, you can come back to it later down the road. Second thing before we get started, I made the mistake as I was discussing with our guest host today about all the 6-cost cards. Somehow we forgot to talk about Hulk. Hulk is one of the first 6-cost cards you obtain in the game. And so just want to make sure that I cover Hulk. Hulk is a 6-cost card, 11 power, no ability. So, most people aren't playing Hulk very quickly after you start to unlock more cards, but he does play into that genre of not having the ability, so he's boosted by certain locations, certain other cards. But just didn't want to skip talking about Hulk, even though it's brief. But with that being said, again, make sure to follow the podcast. This is our last episode covering the base cards in the game, but we will be back with episodes about locations, about monetization, about the leaked cards, about deck building, etc. In the coming weeks. So make sure to follow the podcast, please, if you'd be willing. Leave a review, leave a rating of the podcast on your favorite podcast platform, just to help with exposure for the group. With that all being said, thank you for listening as always, and let's dive into today's episode. Hey listeners, we are back with our final episode of breaking down the cards that are currently in the game. Thank you for joining us in this series of episodes to kind of kick off this podcast. Really excited to have you here for the conclusion. There is a lot of spicy flavor to these cards we're going to be talking about today, and just a lot of fun and unique mechanics that we're going to be describing. So once again, I am joined by a co-host for this episode. I am joined by Gator. Gator, why don't you introduce yourself to the listeners?
What's up, guys? I'm Gator. I've been playing an absolute ton of Marvel Snap the past couple of weeks. It's been crazy. I finished, I think it was like rank 230 last season. I've been streaming on Twitch almost every day, and it's just been an absolutely phenomenal time. Love the game right now.
Awesome. Well, we are glad to have you here. I'm sure you've seen kind of the meta evolve, but also we're going to be talking about some cards that really haven't been unlocked by a lot of people yet. And so we're going to be talking about what we've seen with some of these cards, but we will be talking also about, some theory crafting and what may be and how these cards can play into, different archetypes, etc. So let's dive in here. So this will be all of the 6 and above cost cards. So kicking off here, first up, we have Agatha Harkness. Very unique card. Agatha is a 6-cost, 13 power card, and her ability reads, Agatha starts in your hand and plays your cards for you. I don't think a ton of people have unlocked this one, but I've seen some people kind of randomly generate it. We also have a location that does something similar. Have you seen this pop up in any games kind of as a randomly generated card yet?
I have, and I want to say, out of every single card we're going to see today, this is the worst one. Out of everything. This thing is, if you ever play Agent 13 and you generate Agatha Harkness, you will lose the game on the spot. There's actually no AI that goes into Agatha. She literally just plays cards randomly, and it is one of the most brutal card techs out of any card in the game. I mean, this thing will just lose you the game on the spot. It's not even like a well-statted card. It's just bad. I don't know. You don't want this card.
Yeah, I mean, I saw, when people first saw this revealed, everybody's thinking, man, it's going to like play the game for me. I can just like grind, AI, just have the computer play for me, whatever. But that's not how it works. Like you say, it basically is it's a toss up, right? Like, it's like, I would even say maybe it's not even a 50-50 chance. It may be lower than that, but
you will lose every game. Every single game
you
will lose.
Yeah. I think it's a funny card, but probably not something that's going to see a lot of play, especially in laddered play. So up next, we have America Chavez. America Chavez, on the other hand, we've seen lots of play of. America Chavez, you unlock in the second pool of cards, so a lot of people have been unlocking her. She is a 6-cost, 10 power card, and her ability reads, you draw this card on turn 6 and not before. So we've seen some other cards that have a similar ability in the lower tiers. We have Quicksilver and Domino in the 1-cost and the 2-cost. What do you think? America Chavez better than those cards? Worth playing in a lot of decks?
So she's actually a lot more similar to Quicksilver and Domino than most people think. Both Quicksilver and Domino are just completely terrible cards. You never want to put them in your deck. But Chavez, she's still a pretty poorly statted minion for 6 mana. However, the key difference between Quicksilver, Domino, and Chavez is that whenever you draw a 6-cost card early on in the game, it really sucks. It's just bad. If you're playing an aggressive deck lower to the curve, and you draw a 6-drop, it ruins your game plan. It's just not something you want in your hand. Chavez guarantees on 6 mana every single game, you're going to have a pretty powerful play. So if you're playing a deck like Khazar, for example, in my Khazar deck, I believe I have 7 1-drops in there. By turn 6, my hand is empty, right? So if I were to draw a top deck, I'd get a 1-drop, and I'd put 3 power on the board and spend 1 mana. Chavez, in these super low-to-the-ground decks, you essentially draw multiple cards worth of mana on turn 6. Instead of playing 1 mana, you spend 6 mana. You always spend 6 mana. You always get that constant 10 power. And for decks like that, it's just a super strong finisher. In decks with other 6-drops and full hands on turn 6, a Devil Dinosaur can be more power than a Chavez. So she's not a card you put in every deck, but when your curve is super low, Chavez is absolutely crazy on turn 6.
Yeah, agreed. Definitely the combo you mentioned, Khazar and America Chavez, we've seen a lot of play. A lot of people are using that as a combo to climb the ladder. So. Hey everybody, I wanted to jump in here for just a second to tell you about Anchor. Anchor is a tool that I am using to create this podcast and distribute it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and various other podcasting platforms. Anchor is an app you can download for free on the App Store and use to record, edit, add sound effects, etc., and distribute your podcast. I chose to use it because it was very simple to get up and going quickly, and it was free to use. If you have a podcast idea that you've been throwing around in your mind and you'd like to get out there, make sure to download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started and create your podcast today. So Apocalypse is another card that people unlock relatively early. So we've seen some play of it. I've tried it out a little bit. Apocalypse is a 6-cost, 8-power card, and the ability reads, when you discard this from your hand, put it back with +4 power. Now, I think this is a unique ability. I think this obviously can stack multiple times, which is powerful. I personally just don't think we've seen enough of the discard archetype in the pool 3 of cards and beyond unlocked to really have this be viable all the time, but I don't know if you would agree or disagree with that.
So I actually kind of have the opposite opinion. I think when you're super early on in the game and you're playing discard, Apocalypse is a decent payoff. You play Lady Sif on turn 2, discards your highest cost card. You play a 2 mana card for 4 power. You get this 6 mana 12 power on 6. It's just kind of decent. But when you're in pool 3 and you're getting all of these new discard cards, there's just so much more power there than Apocalypse. You have to discard this guy at least twice for him to actually be an unfair 6-drop, because a 6 mana 12 power is by no means good when you're in pool 3. There's so many better options. And when I compare him to someone like Hela, I get that Hela can be discarded and Apocalypse cannot be, but the payoff is just so much higher there. Hela can pull some massive cards that you've discarded this game. Apocalypse needs, again, 2 discards. And is a 6 mana 16 power that strong? Just play a dinosaur. That's all you have to do. So I'd say early on, solid discard card, but later on, just play Ghost Rider, Hela. There's better cards.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's a fair opinion. Up next is Arnim Zola. Arnim is a 6-cost, 0-power card, and his ability reads, On reveal, destroy a random friendly card here, add copies of it to the other locations. I think this, has a lot of power potential. Being able to get a card duplicated at two locations, right? If you can kind of get the right card targeted by only having one card to destroy it at that location, um, it's very powerful to get a second copy of a card on the board.
It's a dangerous card. Getting two copies of potentially very powerful card is like, it's scary. And with Wave being introduced into the game that makes your next turn all your cards cost 4, you can potentially cheat out a 6-drop and then copy it with Zola on turn 6. I don't actually see the card that pushes that to being strong, though. And when you look at it on a baseline, making two copies of a card you have, it sounds pretty good. Like, you know what? Sure. But typically, you're going to play a 5-drop, and then you're going to Zola it. So you're pretty much paying 6 mana for an extra copy of your 5-drop. I don't know what 5-drop you want so badly that you want 2 copies of it, but paying 6 mana for an extra 5-drop, I just don't see it. Especially it's random. There's just so many hoops you have to jump through. There might be a card that when you make 2 of it, it's just going to be crazy. And if you can cheat it out, it'll be strong with Zola. But right now, I just don't see the synergy.
Yeah, I think that's a fair opinion. It definitely could be a better synergy as other cards are released down the road. Up next, we have Blue Marvel. Blue Marvel is a 6-cost, 4-power card. His ability reads, ongoing, your other cards have +1 power. Now, that is other cards at all locations. This is specific to a location, just to be clear. So, if you've maxed out your board, you could potentially get 12 power from this, right? In addition to the 4 power he has. So that's 16 power for a 6 cost. So similar to kind of you were talking about Apocalypse being discarded twice, but in this case you don't need to do any discarding, it's just playing him on the board.
For the same reason that you had to jump through so many hoops to make Apocalypse a 6 mana 16 power, and that's not even that unfair, it's the same thing for Blue Marvel. Filling your board up over the first 5 turns with, it's 11 other minions. That is an insane requirement. This card is egregiously bad. It's kind of interesting if you can cheat it out with Wave and then put an Onslaught on top of it. There's some interesting things there, but if you're swarming your opponent, just play Khazar. It's 4 mana, it has more power, and just play 1-drops. It's just a better option than Blue Marvel is.
Yeah, I have found that as I've played and I've seen other plays that Khazar seems to be more consistent with the deck if you play it right than Blue Marvel. So up next we have Destroyer. This is an interesting one. Destroyer is a 6-cost, 14 power card. So pretty high, but his ability reads, on reveal, destroy your other cards. And, that is reading other cards, not at a specific location. That's on your whole side of the board. So definitely leading into that destroy archetype, right? If you loaded up your board that have cards that have, as they're destroyed, have positive effects, Wolverine, Nova, other things, maybe there's some good here, but I don't know. Just clearing your whole board at the end of the game doesn't seem like it's going to be too great to me, but you may have a different opinion.
This card's on reveal reads, lose you the game on the spot. There's nothing to do. I mean, the best possible outcome is you play a Bucky Barnes and a Wolverine. And on turn 6, you play Destroyer. You get a 6-power random location. You get a 14-power location and a random 3-power card somewhere. If that's something you're building a deck around, I don't know, man. This thing is really bad. It's better than Agatha because you can just not play Destroyer when it's in your hand. Agatha forces you to play her game. I have no idea how you could possibly play Destroyer in any deck. This should have 20 power at least.
Yeah.
Infinite's requirement is way easier than this.
Yeah. I think this could be powerful given certain cards being added to the game that have more to do with the destroy archetype and being destroyed regenerates them or duplicates them, etc. But right now, I don't think anybody's going to be playing this in a deck right now. They would need to
print a 5-power when this is destroyed, make a 30-power Thanos or something crazy, because this is unreal bad.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested to hear your opinion on this next one, because of the stat line. But up next, we have Doctor Doom. Doctor Doom is a 6-cost, 5-power card. The ability reads, on reveal, add a 5-power Doombot to each other location. So essentially, for 6 mana, you are getting 15 power, but it's divided up 5, 5, 5 across the 3 locations on the board. Yeah, I don't know. Obviously, you can kind of spread that power out, which is different than some of the cards we've been looking at so far today. But what is your opinion? Good, bad, middling?
So a lot of the cards we've seen today have not been very good. I keep going after like you have to jump through this hoop and that hoop for 6 mana for an X amount of power. You know what? Doctor Doom, you play him on turn 6, you get 15 power. Just like some stats. You know what? It's a solid 6-drop. Out of all the 6-drops, he's probably one of, if not the best. Just play him on 6. He's just powerful. Like no hoops to jump through, no synergy. You pay 6 mana, you get a ton of stats. Honestly, just love the card. It's just good.
Yeah, and I do think being able to maybe play across more locations than your opponent is expecting on the last turn of the game, may turn the tides in your favor. So that's something to keep in mind. Up next, we have Galactus. Galactus is a 6-cost, 3-power card. I'm kind of surprised by the low stat there, but on reveal, if this is your only card here, destroy all other locations. Yeah, I don't feel like this is good.
So nobody has Galactus yet. I'm not even sure if he's unlockable in the game. He might just be like randomly generatable. We don't know yet. This effect is actually super powerful. You pay a big drawback, and again, if you play it on turn 6, you lose the game on the spot. Yeah, but there's cards like Wave. If you play Wave on turn 3 into a turn 4 Galactus, into a big 5-drop and a big 6-drop, you're probably gonna win the game. Pair it with Death. Death is a 9-mana card that has, I believe, 12 power. That costs 1 less for every card that was destroyed this game. Every card that Galactus deletes counts for that. So you can get super cheap, super big minions. And if your deck just has large cards in it, and your opponent's more of a swarm deck, Galactus just beats them. This is not the kind of card that we can really analyze until we play it. Some people are saying you play Thanos, you draw through your deck. I don't know about the Thanos idea. That seems like a bit of a meme to me. But if there's a way we can draw Galactus consistently every game and play him on turn 4, turn 5, play a Death alongside him, that sounds like a real winning game plan to me. I'm not sure if the tools are there yet, but once we unlock all the cards, something might actually come out of this card.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how consistent a Galactus play could be later on. So up next, we have Giganto. Giganto is a 6-cost, 14-power card, and his ability reads, you can only play this at the left location. I don't think that's a bad stat line with the 14 power, and obviously there is a slight limitation here. You can only be played at the left location, but obviously you normally in your control to leave that spot open, though how Marvel Snap works, right? There may be a disfavorable location in the left location, right, that would make you not want to play it as much. So an interesting card to be sure.
I don't remember the pool this is in, but it's either in pool 2 or pool 3. If this was in pool 1 and a new player unlocked this early, this is actually a super solid card. Again, we're talking about stats. When you really get down to things, how much mana are you paying for how many stats? 6 mana for 14 power early on, you know what? It's just good. It's just a decent drop. And if you unlock this early, maybe even predetermined to replace Hulk in your deck, I'm not sure, it's actually quite good. But right now, by the time you unlock it, you have so many better options. You just don't put him in your deck at any point. He's not that bad, though. Like, 6 mana, 14 power. It's decent. You just get the card too late when you have better options already unlocked.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, we don't, if we have like, we have some cards that will power certain spots on the board, or, the spot to the right of you is given additional power, etc. It'll be interesting to see if there's any synergies later on of like that specifically buff cards at the left location or something where this, has a synergy. But for right now, I agree with you. I think we're not going to see a lot of play with this once more people unlock it. So up next is a card I have seen more and more people start to play with in the last couple of days, just as more people are unlocking cards that have move synergy, is Heimdall. Heimdall is a 6-cost, 8-power card. The ability reads, on reveal, move your other cards 1 location to the left. Okay, so it kind of takes your board and it shifts everything that it can to the left. Obviously, if spots are already full, then it won't. But this plays well with multiple man and several other cards that kind of get buffed or benefited by shifting.
Heimdall is actually a crazy card. It's not greatly statted. I know I've been saying stacks. 6 mana for 8 power is pretty bad. I admit it. Okay, fine. But this on reveal effect has the potential to just completely change the dynamics of the game. I'm talking even outside of a movement deck. It's just your opponent is playing the game around what they see. And if you just have a Heimdall in your hand, the reality of the game that's being played is so much different from what your opponent sees. That kind of deception, what Heimdall unlocks, is actually extremely powerful. And in a move deck, it's unreal. You buff a vulture, you buff a dagger, you get so much value out of this card. He's crazy in those movement decks, but I've been playing Wave recently, and I needed a 6-drop. And the 6 drops in pools 1 through 3, they're pretty bad, generally speaking. As I've been saying, all these cards kind of being mediocre. Heimdall is you just put him in your deck, and he just sometimes wins the game on 6. It's not super often. He's not that consistent. But don't underestimate an effect that changes the board this much. And in a movement deck, he's just straight up crazy.
Yeah. No, one of the things we've talked about on a lot of the episodes is, there's all these cards and they have these different synergies with each other, but a big piece of Marvel Snap is that bluffing of where on the board are you trying to win, right? You're trying to win at least 2 of the 3 locations. So your opponent's trying to figure out where you're investing, where you're not investing, and they're playing to that. And Heimdall really can just throw you for a loop. I've lost the games in this exact scenario, right? I played thinking one thing with my opponent, and then too late, I realized they were doing this, and it was able to, steal the game from under me. So I think it's a powerful card. So the next Hela is one you've already mentioned a little bit. Hela is a 6-cost, 6-power card, and her ability reads, on reveal, play all cards you discarded from your hand to random locations. What are your thoughts on Hela?
Hela probably has the biggest ceiling out of any card in the entire game. If you discard an Infinite, even just like a Hulk, you're paying 6 mana for so many stats. It's actually kind of incredible. The problem with Hela, though, is she's a 6-drop, and she's not Chavez. So she can just sit in your hand and get discarded from the cards you're playing to synergize her with. You can maybe copy Hela, so maybe play a Moon Girl, get 2 copies of Hela for that protection against her getting discarded. But the fact that she can get discarded, it's worrying. There might be some ways to abuse her down the line, but right now you kind of just put her in a deck with big cards, in a deck that discards, and you just kind of hope she doesn't get discarded. The ceiling here is super high, but the fact that, again, she can just get discarded, it's scary. I would look at a card like, I think it's called Ghost Rider. Do I have that correct? The 3-drop?
Yep.
So Ghost Rider is a card that it summons a random card you discard this game. There's some obvious synergy there where if you're playing a deck that's built around discarding high-cost cards, Ghost Rider is very efficient. Hela is very efficient. And if you discard Hela, Ghost Rider can bring back Hela, and that can be very powerful as well. So there's lots of potential here, but high-cost cards that play around discard synergy without can't be discarded text, it's just kind of weird. But I feel like someone's going to break this card eventually.
Yeah, there's definitely some risk versus reward here, but I agree with you. I think the ceiling is very high. Being able to play several cards across the board, on the last turn, huge amounts of power could be could be, nigh unstoppable if we get it right. Somebody can get the right strategy going. So up next, we have Leader. Leader is a 6-cost, 4-power card. The ability reads, on reveal, copy all cards your opponent played this turn, but on your side. Now, I haven't seen this played at all yet, so I don't know if I'm assuming the copy will play all the cards your opponent played, but copy them to the reverse, sorry, not the reverse, the identical location that they played them if you have space available. Does that make sense? Does that sound right to you?
It is. And the last thing you said, if you have space available, is the problem. When your opponent and you are both playing a Marvel Snap game, you're playing a certain amount of cards per side, they are too. Both of your decks are built around filling the sides of the board differently. Leader is technically, just by the numbers, you play a 6-drop, you get 4 power plus your opponent's 6 mana turn. That's good. You do your opponent plus 4. The problem is that your board is not designed for your opponent's hand. And when you play Leader, let's say you have no space. They play 3 cards. You're not getting their 3 cards. So the fact that he's and again, you can also just not be playing for a certain location. And then they play on a location. And if you're just mirroring their play, you're getting no value out of it. So Leader's a card that looks good on paper. But when you analyze cards, you have to think, what's the best case scenario? What's the worst case scenario? The best case scenario is taking your opponent's 6-drop plus 4. How good is that? It's not that great, right?
Mm-hmm.
Breaking Leader is really, really bad. So the risk is high. The reward is 4 power on a 6-drop. That's not very impressive to me. I don't like this card.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. I don't think this, with the game so short and the board so small, relatively speaking, right? Like the possibility that you're going to have the correct spots open to really take advantage of what they're doing is just unlikely. So up next, we have Magneto. I love this art. Magneto is a 6-cost, 12-power card. Ability reads, on reveal, move all opposing 3 and 4-cost cards to this location. So essentially, you can throw off your opponent, pull any 3 or 4-cost cards across their board to this location, obviously filling it out, maxing it out at the 4 cards available to be played at a location.
So you look at this card, I look at this card, you're paying 6 mana for 12 power. We've established it's not too great, right? And you're moving opposing 3 and 4-cost cards. When I read that, I'm not very impressed. I'm not going to lie. It seems pretty dull to me. But actually, I was playing yesterday, and I was playing Devil Dino, right? I believe my opponent was playing hard for mid, and we were both competing for the right-hand lane. And I had a Dino in the right lane. My opponent played Magneto to bolster his mid lane, and then pull my Dinos out of the lane we were fighting for and into the lane he had already won to make them useless. He won the game off that play. I'm not sure if this card is actually good or not, but initially I thought it was just unplayable and it had no purpose. But with Dinos being so strong, like a 3-cost card has like 10, 12, 14 power right now. Maybe there's something. Maybe it's just kind of an efficient card. You're playing wave. You need some big minions. 6-drops aren't great. Maybe this utility is good enough. I don't think it is. But in a meta where 3 meta cards have 10, 12, 14 power, there might be something here. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, I think it definitely, it's more of I see it as more of a defensive card in the fact that you're trying to throw off your opponent's strategy or lock them out or throw off like you're saying, you're throwing them off from winning a certain location more than it is winning you a location per se. So we'll just have to see what other strategies and offensive strategies this could counter as a defensive card. So up next, we have Odin. Odin, you unlock, kind of in the beginning phases of the game. So everybody's used Odin. Odin is a 6-cost, 8-power card. Ability reads, on reveal, activate the on reveal abilities of your other cards at this location. So essentially, if you're able to load up, when I played Odin, you try to load up your location with the 3 other cards being on reveal, and then you play this card, you get 8 power, which isn't huge, but then potentially you get all of those abilities another time which can be powerful, but I don't know if it's as powerful as some of the things we've talked about today.
So Odin is a solid card when you unlock him. And I actually love this card's design because you get him so early. And when you're playing an Odin deck, you feel like you're playing a real deck with real synergies. You're playing your own reveal cards, they're doing kind of powerful things. You have this payoff card at the end. It all feels very good, and I applaud the devs for making like a starter deck like Odin that actually feels like a cohesive unit. This card is pretty awful though. I mean, the classic curve in the early game stages is White Tiger on 5 into Odin on 6. That's like the bread and butter. That combo is going to win you a lot of games when you unlock Odin. And I enjoy playing that combo myself. But you paid 5 mana for an 8 power minion. That's not very good. And you paid 6 mana for a 16 power minion. Like, okay. A 15 power minion. It's not great. It's not phenomenal. There's some nice synergy here with like the Guardians of the Galaxy playing Rocket Raccoon, you play Star-Lord, you play Groot. Odin becomes kind of like a location winner. If your opponent's playing for a location, you can play Odin on 6 and get like 15 power from him. But again, 6 mana for 15 power in a build around card, it's not great for later stages in the game. But early game, Odin, phenomenal card. White Tiger into Odin, you're going to win a ton of games in the early stages of Marvel Snap.
Yeah. And, there are locations that kind of duplicate on reveal abilities. And that was one of the featured locations early on in the beta. And so, that saw a lot of play as well. But we'll just have to see. I mean, I'm sure more on reveal cards will be added to the game as time goes on. So we'll see, what other synergies Odin has as time goes on. Up next, we have Onslaught. Onslaught is similar, but different. Onslaught is a 6 cost, 6 power card. So worse stat line than Odin. The ability reads ongoing, double your other ongoing effects at this location. So similar to Odin, you're kind of getting all of the ongoing locations twice. Obviously, ongoing means they're continuously happening. But basically, if you get 3 cards with ongoing locations, kind of best case scenario at one location, you throw it on Onslaught, then you get all of those things duplicated, right? So, again, very powerful in the early game. Do you think it'll be powerful in the late game?
I think Onslaught is always terrible. He's very good at winning one location. He's phenomenal at that, actually. You play an Iron Man on turn 5. You play pretty much any other ongoing effect besides, like, Claw and Khazar. It usually plays for the location you're playing on right now. And that's really the problem with Onslaught. With Odin, you're getting White Tigers. You're getting Iron Hearts. It's providing support to other lanes that are not the lane you're putting your 6-drop in. But Onslaught just overkills a lane super hard. If its ongoing effect is actually giving you good value, that means you've committed other high-cost ongoing effects to your current location. I actually was playing Onslaught with Wave. So Wave lets you cheat a card again on turn 4. And when you play Onslaught on turn 4, there's kind of some interesting things you can do. You can like Khazar and Blue Marvel and Claw. And I actually played probably like 20, 25 games trying to make some sort of an Onslaught thing work. There's just not enough ongoing effects that help your lane and another lane powerfully. Claw into Onslaught is not a good curve. You're not getting good stats for that curve. If a magical ongoing card comes out where most of its stats are in the ongoing effect, but it affects 2 lanes at once, it has to be a really good card, by the way. You can play Onslaught on 6 and probably do pretty solidly. But right now, again, if you have a Dino in a lane, you're already feeling good. You do not need a 6-drop for a second Dino in that lane. Iron Man, same thing. Punisher, Captain America, all of these cards. You're already committed to the lane. So you commit, and Onslaught makes you commit more. There's still another lane you have to win. And Onslaught does not help you win 2 lanes. It helps you win 1. And in a game where you have to win 2 lanes to win, I just don't like it.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense what you're saying. I mean, obviously, Mr. Fantastic, he buffs the 2 lanes. So you play him in the middle, he could buff the 2 lanes to the side. But then you double that and you're only getting 4 additional power, right?
Yeah, you use the 6-drop to give 2 power to an adjacent lane. Not great.
Yeah, not really going to, get you across the finish line there at the end. So Well, up next is another card that you get relatively early on, and I don't think is very great, but we'll see what you think. Spectrum is a 6 cost, 4 power card, so one of the lowest stat lines we've seen. Her ability is on reveal, give your ongoing cards +2 power. So that is across the whole board. Um, obviously this wants to play into a deck where you're going to have lots of ongoing cards on the field. So it's kind of like Kazar where you get, a buff to specific cards or like Blue Marvel. Um, and you can spread that across the board. I don't know. I just haven't seen it be as consistent as I'd like it to get really high power returns from this.
So the card the archetype I compare a Spectrum deck to are Murloc decks in Hearthstone. So Murlocs, when you play them in Hearthstone, they're essentially small minions that reward you for playing more of themselves. When you're building a Murloc deck, all you do is you search up the word Murloc and you just put cards that say Murloc on them. Because the more Murlocs you put in your deck, the better all of your Murlocs get, and they all just synergize and they boost each other up. Spectrum is the exact same thing. You just put cards in your deck that have the word ongoing. Colossus, awful card, 2 mana, 3 power. Ongoing effect does essentially nothing. It reads ongoing. It's actually a pretty good 2-drop in a Spectrum deck. It's 2 mana, 5 power. It's not bad. I really like the fact that Spectrum exists, and she allows for very linear decks. You play a 1 mana card, Ant-Man, phenomenal in the deck, says ongoing. A 2-drop, you play your Colossus, says ongoing, he'll get buffed. Captain America, Punisher, Warpath, Namor, Iron Man, all of these cards that just say ongoing. And then you play Spectrum, and she's like, all the cards you play this game are pretty well statted. That's pretty much her battle cry. Her on reveal, sorry. So unlike Onslaught, she helps other lanes and she spreads out the power. She's way better than Onslaught. Like, she's actually kind of viable. If they're better ongoing cards, she actually could be pretty good. Because we think Nova's broken, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nova's getting nerfed. That card is not staying at +2 power. Spectrum, if your whole deck just says ongoing, that's Nova. That is just what that is. So if we have more solid ongoing cards printed, and you can curve out, preferably like 1 and 2 cost ongoing cards, because the more you play, the better. If you play a 1 mana ongoing card, 2, 3, 4, 5, you're not getting as many buffs as more of like a swarm ongoing effect.
Yeah.
But that on reveal is super strong, and it helps multiple lanes. Spectrum's quite nice, a lot better than Onslaught, and there's a world where she's pretty decent.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely a fair assessment. You may have swayed me a little bit there. I'll have to see how things go in the future, but that makes a lot of sense. So up next, we have a card that has some serious flavor to it. Thanos. I have several tabs open to talk about Thanos. Thanos is a 6-cost, 8-power card. The ability reads, at the start of the game, shuffle the 6 Infinity Stones into your deck. Well, you may ask, what are the 6 Infinity Stones? So we will be going through those. First, we have the Mind Stone. It is a 1-cost, 1-power card that reads, on reveal, draw 2 stones from your deck. Next, we have the Reality Stone. It is a 1-cost, 1-power card that reads, on reveal, transform this location into a new one. Draw a card. Time Stone is a 1-cost, 1-power card. It reads, on reveal, draw a card. Next turn, you get +1 energy. The next card is the Space Stone, which is a 1-cost, 1-power card that reads, on reveal, next turn you can move 1 card at this location. Draw a card. Next we have the Soul Stone. The Soul Stone is another 1-cost, 1-power card that reads, on reveal, draw a card. Ongoing. Enemy cards here have -1 power. And last, we have the Power Stone, a 1-cost, 3-power card that reads, ongoing. If you've played all 6 stones, Thanos has +10 power wherever he is. Very interesting, very flavorful. So obviously, if you get that +10 buff to Thanos, that is a 6-cost, 18-power card. But really, you're having to spend the 6 power on all the stones throughout the game as well.
Thanos is a card we're not going to understand until we unlock it and we start playing it. Right now, I've seen some theory crafts of people playing Galactus and their draw engine being Thanos paired with cards like Quinjet, which makes your one cost cards cost 0. I believe Falcon and Beast return cards to your hand, and the idea is to play these stones and cycle them and do all this crazy stuff. It's a lot of hoops to jump through, and you have to keep in mind if you're playing these stones to draw to a specific card, just by putting Thanos in your deck, you diluted your deck a ton. So you have to not only play each stone once to make it back to how many cards you added to your deck, you have to bounce them and keep bouncing. I mean, keep drawing these bad cards that only work with stones. And that are, I mean, you're playing 2 mana for like a Falcon, 3 cost, and it throws your 1 cost cards back in your hand. Then you spend your turn 3 playing some 1/1s. It just doesn't sound like a game plan that's winning any Marvel Snap games. I mean, you're jumping through so many hoops, and by the end of it, you might draw like 3 or 4 cards deeper into your deck. I don't think you ever want this card in your deck. I'm willing to be wrong and for Thanos to come out and just be like the nuttiest card in the game. But right now, I mean, you don't want to dilute your deck with these random 1 cost cards. Are the Infinity Stones good standalone cards? Yes. But usually a bunch of, I mean, you get, it's like a 15, 16, 17 card deck. There are good cards in your deck you want to draw to. You're playing some cards that are the cornerstone of your deck. This just dilutes your deck. You have to pay these 1 mana tax to get your cards back. This just seems clunky. And if you're paying it just for that Soulstone payoff, as I've been saying this whole time, 6 mana for a stat stick has to be a huge, huge, huge stat stick. 6 mana for 18 power with the precondition of having played 6 of these stones, that is not that good. Like I'm saying, just not. It has to be more than that. Right now, I think this card is not great, but there is a chance Thanos comes in, someone finds the deck, and just breaks the game. I'm willing to be wrong when that happens, but on a baseline, I don't think he's that strong.
Yeah. I think, like you're saying, I think I want somebody to find a way to break the game with this just because it's just so much flavor, Thanos searching out the stones. And just if there's some strategy that can work and it's fun to watch, I think it'd be so fun. But, we will see. We will see once people unlock him and how that plays out. Up next, we have the Infinite, another card you've referenced a little bit here. So Infinite has the highest base stat line here. So it is a 6-cost, 20 power card. The ability reads, if you played a card last turn, you can't play this. So you've talked about Wave. Wave is a new card in the game. So obviously, if you play Wave on turn 3 to lower your card's cost to 4 on the next turn, you wouldn't be able to use that on Infinite to play it early because you obviously played Wave on the last turn. So, as of right now, you really are locked down to this being on turn 6 unless there's a location that lowers cost of cards, etc. But what are your thoughts on Infinite?
Yeah, so Infinite's text is very restricting. It makes it so that most of the ramp cards, I think almost every single one apart from Electro, you can't actually ramp into this card because you have to play the ramp card the turn before and then play your thing you're ramping into. But Infinite blocks that. The powerful thing about Infinite is, first of all, a 6-mana 20 power that you have to pass your turn 5 for, it's not actually good. Again, I just said Thanos, a 6-mana 18 power is not like ridiculous. A 6-mana 20 power you have to pass your turn 5 for it's pretty bad. However, there's cards like Sunspot. Sunspot rewards you for skipping your turn 5. So instead of 11 mana effectively for skipping a turn and playing Infinite, you're paying for 20 power, you're paying 11 mana for 25 power. It's better. We're still not there yet. I think the main use of Infinite is going to be in decks that can make use of the fact that there is a card in my hand that says 20 power on it. I'm thinking not necessarily Hela, but I'm thinking Lady Sif discarding Infinite, playing a Ghost Rider. That is crazy. Jubilee pulling an Infinite. Crazy. Just the fact that this card says the number 20 on it. Just 20. Anything that pulls a card from your hand. I mean, if your opponent leeches you and you just play Infinite on 6, you just win the game. there's a lot of potential in this card. I don't think this will ever find a home in a deck that wants to just play it on turn 6 because they skip turn 5. Because even with Sunspot, it's not a great curve, but that card says 20 power, and that's dangerous. I will also note Twitch chat loves this card. This card and Leech, that's their favorite cards by far. So especially Leech though. Leech takes the cake for them.
Yeah, I've seen multiple people in their Twitch streams say something like, "I'm going to play the Leech for chat," right? Like or
I
things
can
like
talk
that.
about Leech for like hours. This card, random 5-drop discussion. Leech is one of the worst cards in the game. Okay, continue. Infinite, interesting card. Leech, less interesting. Very bad.
Yeah, I would have to agree there. Up next, we have the last 6-cost card, but we will have one after this, which is a 9-cost that you've already referenced. But Ultron is a 6-cost, 7-power card that has the ability on reveal create 4 1-power drones at each adjacent location. And I believe that is only on your side of the board, not on your opponent's side of the board, correct?
Correct. So when this card was revealed, someone actually pinged me, and they were like, "Is this card a meme? Is this actually real?" This is on its baseline one of, if not one of, it's so bad. Like, I'm sorry. You need 4 spaces on each adjacent side. You have had to have played no cards in your adjacent locations, and you get a 6-mana 15 power, and you end the game with 1 populated location and 2 4-power locations. I actually just don't know why this card exists. There's Patriot synergy, and there were some people that were doing this like super in depth. If you play 1 location and you Moon Girl a Patriot and you play Ultron on 6, you get 4 5-power drones. That's still not even that good. And even then, I actually chimed in. I was like, what if you just played Doctor Doom on 6 instead? And it came out to be like 2 less power with a card that's better in every other situation. Ultron, I don't know why it's here. If this card went from 7 power to like 14, no one would care. It still wouldn't get played. This is about like 10 power understated. It's really bad. And like, do you have any ideas about why this card exists? Anything? Give me anything. I need something.
No, like you say, like all I can think is, yeah, like Patriot, and you're throwing Khazar in there, and you're doing all these things to try to buff these 1-drop cards, right? And all these things, but like that's so much that has to go so right in an exact way with no other variety to it to win, and I just don't think that's ever going to happen consistently. So
I will say, if this game did not have board space limitations, there'd be like an inch of power in Ultron with a Khazar deck. The problem is you need your board to be like almost empty. And Ultron plus Khazar is going to get you 8 power on your adjacent locations, which is not going to win you any games. Your opponent plays Nova Carnage, they're going to beat you on that lane by itself. Yeah, Ultron is it's not a great card, to say the very least.
Yeah. Well, up next we have our last card of the episode. You've already referenced this a little bit, but we wanted to go over it one more time. That is Death. Death is a 9-cost card, which is very unique. You know, obviously we've seen kind of the cards follow the cost of the turns. There's 6 turns in the game. Death is a 9-cost, 12-power card that reads, cost 1 less for each card destroyed this game. Definitely playing into that destroy archetype. If you're destroying cards throughout the game, you know, you could lower her cost significantly and play her and another card at the end of the game.
Death feels like a really weird design for me. This thing costs way too much mana. Energy, excuse me. 9 energy for 12 power. Obviously, it's not playable, right? How many cards can you destroy in a game apart from Galactus itself? You play a Carnage, you destroy 3 cards. Now you have a 6 energy 12 power card. You pretty much have to destroy an entire location twice by turn 6 for this card to be good. I don't like how limiting it is. It's very good with Galactus specifically, because it actually will be 0 mana 12 power lots of the time. But I would have preferred this card to cost like 4 mana, 3 mana, and have it actually be a destroy deck synergy card. But you just can't destroy enough cards to make this work. You can't play this many cards and destroy them and still have the mana to play death at the end. In Galactus, though, very dangerous. It turns out a 0 mana 12 power in a game you're only playing for one location is ridiculous. It's super strong. This is one of the reasons why Galactus is scary, but by itself, I don't really like it.
Yeah. And it runs the risk. You've kind of already said this, but it runs the similar risk to Hela, where, this card could be, well, I guess we're talking destroy. We're not talking discard.
It's destroy. Yeah. It's not it's not an issue because the decks also don't have that much synergy. You're probably not playing a destroyed discard deck. It's just, it kind of has anti-synergy with the game, which is not a good thing to have anti-synergy with.
Yeah. And especially when it's so quick and the board is so limited in a good way. But well, that is the 6 cost cards. Now, before we kind of close things out, I would just love to give you a minute. We've talked about a lot of cards here. Obviously there's plenty of cons on some of these cards just because they're very limiting for what you're doing, kind of using all the mana on your last turn of the game, or all your energy. But which would you say is your favorite? Now, that could be because of the strategy or the impact you think it has, or it could just be the art, the character. What is your favorite 6+ cost card in the game right now?
It has to be America Chavez. I mean, that Khazar deck, Khazar, a bunch of 1-cost cards. I've probably played almost 1,000 games of that deck. And when I pulled her for the first time, that changed the entire deck. Because again, I went from playing 1 to 2 mana on turn 6 to paying 6 mana every single turn on turn 6. And pretty much added 10 power to my board every single game. And the reason especially that I say America is that, like, there are not a lot of good 6-cost cards in this game. I've been very critical. That's kind of my persona. But they're just not great. And Chavez essentially says, you know what? I know all the other cards in my mana slot are terrible. I'm not going to bother you until you need me. I'm going to show up. I'm just going to give you a good effect, unlike all of these other 6 drops in the game. She's reliable, she's solid, and has to be my favorite out of all of them.
Awesome. Yeah. I think she's one of the most played cards right now with that Khazar combo, and I think she'll continue to be for the foreseeable future. So thank you for sharing that. Well, Gator, really appreciate you being here on the show. Really appreciate you kind of helping us close out this segment we've had over the last couple of weeks of breaking down all the cards. We're going to be moving forward and jumping to new content, but a lot of people have loved kind of listening to these and strategizing about the game. So appreciate you being here. But I just want to give you a minute before we close out to just tell users again, how can they follow you? How can they support you? How can they consume the content that you're putting out around this game and other things?
Before I shout out myself, I want to shout out you for listening to me insult every single card we've gone through for the past 45 minutes. I bet every other person you've had on has been like, oh, there's some decent applications. I've just said they suck. And hopefully that bluntness is it's a welcome thing on the show. Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, I think the listeners, they like honesty, so we appreciate that here.
Yeah. So if you want more than honesty, where I call things how it is, typically I call things how they are. I stream most nights around 7 p.m. Eastern time, around there, twitch.tv/Gator_MS. That's Gator_MS for Marvel Snap. We have a mix of playing super good decks, meme decks. We try and mix it up, but it's a pretty fun time. I've been enjoying it. Stream has been enjoying it. And again, if you want blunt honesty and just come in, share your deck, I'll give you my honest thoughts. I'm not going to insult you as a person, but if you put Quicksilver in your deck, or especially a Scarlet Witch, you're going to hear about it. That's all I'm going to say.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Gator, for being here. Listeners, as always, thank you for listening. Just remember to follow the podcast, subscribe to it so you can be notified of new episodes starting next week. We will have new episodes covering new topics. We will talk about locations. We will talk about art. We will talk about monetization of the game. We are going to dive into lots of things about this game. So look forward to that. Make sure to follow so you don't miss any episodes. And thank you for listening. Can't Stop Snapping is a podcast written, produced, recorded, and hosted by Michael Thurman. Thanks for listening.